Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? We are back with our waiver wire show here in week 15. If your playoffs already didn't start, they're probably starting this week. We've got a few injuries to go over. We've got quite a few ineffective players, some guys that are banged up. It's the end of the season. We might see some rest. It really depends. So over the next couple of weeks, my goal with the waiver wire show is to get as many guys in that could possibly be utilized by anybody out there, whether you're in shallow leagues or deep leagues or large leagues or small leagues. It doesn't matter. My hope is that there are some guys that you will find on this show, and some of the guys you might look at and be like, why would we ever own them? We might need to stash a couple of guys. I don't know. We're just going to talk about everyone that could end up becoming a thing by the end of the season. It's better to be safe than sorry, as I like to say. But hit that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new here, and let's hop right into it. And we're going to talk about running backs to kick things off. Zonovan Knight, who probably a majority of you were already running to grab as of last week, is going to be back on here again because Michael Carter returned. He did end up needing to leave at one point again, and he had a pretty costly fumble, but the only other back to get any carries this past week was Michael Carter outside of Zonovan Knight, and he only got 5. So Zonovan Knight also scored. He also added a couple of targets. Now Michael Carter looks like he'll still do some work in the passing game. And honestly, Zonovan Knight's matchup against Detroit this coming week, not great. Teams they're not able to run the football that well against Detroit right now. They're choosing to throw it. So for Zonovan Knight this week, probably a lot lower of a ceiling than we would like, but I think you could throw him out there for a nice, safe floor, especially with a goal line touch. Samaje Perine for Cincinnati. A lot of people kind of dropped him and moved on from him when we saw Joe Mixon would be back, and Joe Mixon saw a majority of the touches. I understand that. But if you own Joe Mixon, you need to own Samaje Perine. Not only that, but we've got injuries right now to T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Hayden Hurst, who we'll talk about here in a few minutes. Those guys all being injured. For those of you in PPR leagues, if Samaje Perine is out there and those 3 guys cannot go next week, now you're looking at adding Samaje Perine and getting maybe 5-6 targets in the passing game. It would be risky, but you need to keep an eye on it. Gus Edwards for Baltimore. J.K. Dobbins had the better day. Okay, he had the better day, but we might be on our third string quarterback in Baltimore by the time week 15 rolls around. We need to go ahead and add Gus Edwards. He still had double-digit carries last week, and if we do find ourselves in that same position against Cleveland, Gus Edwards could have another double-digit carries, and again, carry a low or a high enough floor that if you're just needing to start somebody, Gus Edwards may not be the worst option out there. Jerick McKinnon is going to be a pickup this week potentially. He's got touchdowns in back-to-back games. 3 in the last 2 games with 2 last week, but maybe not a start still. One thing I want you to keep in mind is over the last 3 weeks, he had 6 total catches. So he had more catches last week in week 14 than he did the 3 weeks previously combined. Now, the 2 weeks before that, he had 12 total catches. So a lot of up and down. He was banged up at one point in time. Probably still going to be running it, probably still going to be in a position against Houston where maybe you're not sending everybody. I mean, they did just play Dallas pretty well, but I think that's more of an indicative fact on Dallas than it is Houston. But we'll see what they end up doing. So Jerick McKinnon, PPR league, really half PPR league, maybe, but he's going to be a very risky start for me. Marlon Mack from Denver going up against Arizona. Just want to bring him up. He had a big touchdown catch for Denver. Latavius Murray, he's the guy, but Denver's really out of the playoff race at this point. So in terms of, how they finish up the season, it really could be anybody's game. And maybe we do see Marlon Mack get a few more looks over the course of the end of the season here, knowing that Latavius Murray more than likely won't be back. I would guess Marlon Mack wouldn't be back either, but I think there's a better chance that they would re-sign Marlon Mack to do some backup roles to Javonte Williams next year than they would be Latavius Murray. So keep an eye on that. Maybe they do try to give Marlon Mack a few looks in the upcoming weeks. Jordan Mason for San Francisco. I mean, Deebo Samuel's going to be missing multiple weeks, probably the end of the rest of the regular season here. So he's not going to be doing anything in the back backfield. So Jordan Mason is going to be that backup to CMC now. If you own CMC, you got to have Jordan Mason. You know, after they pulled all the starters this past week against Tampa Bay, 11 carries for 56 yards. We need to own him if we're CMC owners, because if CMC were to be limited in any reason, we already know he's dealing with some knee issues, all right? If those were to spur up over the next couple of weeks, Jordan Mason is going to be a guy that you're going to want to have on your team. Travis Homer, may not need to add him because there is a chance Kenneth Walker will be back this week, but they are on a short week as well. That's why I wanted to bring up Travis Homer again. Now, Travis Homer and Tony Jones, it was a will they, won't they type of thing heading into the weekend. We heard Sunday morning that Tony Jones was going to start and Travis Homer was only going to get third down work. Well, Travis Homer basically got all of the work. And even with all that work, it still wasn't even fantasy viable. That's okay. Still may need him. If you're somebody out there that's struggling right now, first round of the playoffs, and you need to fill some injuries, Travis Homer might be out there if Kenneth Walker were to miss again. Rex Burkhead, Eno Benjamin, and Dare Alawala Bing Bang. I don't even know who to tell you to pick up at this point. All I know is that Dameon Pierce dealing with an ankle injury. He's set to go for an MRI today to find out whether or not it's serious. So who would be the next man up? Well, Rex Burkhead's been there the longest, so I would expect him to be the guy. Eno Benjamin was brought in from Arizona, good pass catching back. And Dare was, he was a guy that, let's just face it, none of them did anything. They all sucked. Rex Burkhead had 2 attempts for -3 yards, and he had 1 target for 1 catch and 5 yards. Eno Benjamin had 3 carries for 1 yard, and Dare had 1 carry for -3 yards and caught 2 of 2 targets for 4 yards. So if I had to add anybody here, I would probably add Rex Burkhead. I don't know if I add anybody, especially at this point. Just keep an eye on what happens with Dameon Pierce. If he does end up missing this week, maybe we do like Rex Burkhead later on in the week after we hear some more reports. But whatever it may be, it's probably going to be an issue no matter what. Let's head on over to the wide receiver position. We're going to start off with Tutu Atwell and Van Jefferson from the LA Rams. I think at this point, having Baker Mayfield is better than any other option that they would have had. So I think we can reestablish a little bit of value for these guys. Now, Tutu Atwell, each of the last 2 weeks has led the team in targets, and that included with Baker Mayfield last week, and probably is going to see some of those more quick routes, some quick passes, which Tutu Atwell would excel in with Baker Mayfield. So if that trend continues, Tutu Atwell is probably going to be the volume guy. Van Jefferson, you're looking for a big play, you're looking for a score, that's where he comes up. 3 touchdowns in the last 5 weeks. He would be more of a touchdown option at this point. Donovan Peoples-Jones from Cleveland, he led the team in targets. 12 targets, 8 receptions, 114 yards. And Watson took a small step towards getting himself healthy again. All right. Or not getting himself healthy, but getting himself feeling better again. Getting himself back out there, kind of reestablished in the game plan and the flow of an NFL game. I don't know if he's going to get any better than what we saw, but it's definitely a step forward from the week before. Donovan Peoples-Jones right now, especially when you have decent matchups against the Ravens and against New Orleans over the next couple of weeks, where we're probably going to be throwing the football a little bit, except maybe next week, especially if Baltimore's dealing with injuries. Donovan Peoples-Jones, if he really is the number 1 target for Deshaun Watson, we've already seen him have some consistent performances this season. He reached his upside this past week. Maybe that upside isn't there every single week, but 60 to 70 yards I think is. Trenton Irwin for Cincinnati going up against Tampa Bay, and I mentioned it already with Samaje Perine. We've got injuries to T. Higgins. He re-injured his hamstring, played 1 snap, didn't play the rest of the game. It sounds like it's a dislocated finger, possibly broken finger for Tyler Boyd. They're saying he's weekly at this point. He's week to week. So I'm expecting that we'll at least miss Tyler Boyd this week. And Hayden Hurst still dealing with an issue with his calf. So Trenton Irwin is a risky grab. He's high risk, okay? But we have seen when there's been some injuries in the past, Trenton Irwin's kind of been that first guy up to kind of fill in those snaps. So I expect him to see some decent snaps this week against Tampa Bay. My fan tracks first up is going to be Chris Moore from Houston, who had a huge week this past week. And if we've got no Brandon Cooks and we've got no Nico Collins, then Chris Moore against Kansas City absolutely is going to be a start. 10 receptions on 11 targets and 124 yards last week. Could see 1 million targets this week against Kansas City. We know Kansas City gives up quite a bit in a passing game. We know Kansas City's going to put up points on Houston, so Houston's going to have to throw it. And we know that in 2 games this year with no Brandon Cooks and no Nico Collins, Chris Moore has been a smash start. Keep an eye on that one this week. DJ Chark and Jamison Williams from Detroit. Now, I'm going to bring up both of these guys because DJ Chark had back-to-back weeks over 90 receiving yards. And even if I don't start him against the Jets this week, I'm still going to want him for the playoff run with matchups against Carolina and Chicago coming up over the next 2 weeks after that. So, for Jamison Williams, here's my thing. Could this be the coming out week? I am going to preface this by saying the dude only played about 10 or 15 snaps. Yes, he had a huge touchdown reception. It was his only catch of the game, and he only had one other target than that. He only played about 10 or 15 snaps, if I read correctly. They're still working him into the game plan. However, this could be the week where they try to let him loose a little bit. And why is that? The matchups on the outside are going to be awful, okay? The cornerbacks for the Jets are elite at this point. Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to see the most, he's going to have the most traffic on him, the most eyes. He's going to see the game plan revolve around trying to stop him. But if you do that, then at that point, I think what Detroit looks at doing is going 3 wide or 4 wide as much as possible. And that is when Jamison Williams, if you go 4 wide or 3 wide with Jamison Williams in the slot, away from those outside corners, we saw it this past week. He gets matched up on a safety. He torches the safety, open for touchdowns. I don't know if I'm starting him this week, but I am absolutely keeping an eye on him to potentially make an impact because of that. How is it possible that Zay Jones isn't more than 60% owned on 3 different platforms? This isn't one-off. 3 different platforms has Zay Jones under 60% owned. He gets Dallas this week. Pick him up and start him. He's a top 24 wide receiver now. Darius Slayton and Richie James, they're both going to get Washington this week, and maybe not a huge opportunity this week coming up for you, but you're going to want them the week after when they play the Vikings in week 16. That is going to be a matchup where both of these guys will be starts for you, especially Darius Slayton. Demarcus Robinson going up against Cleveland. Maybe not a really high upside, but should see plenty of targets. Juwan Jennings, keeping him in mind now that Deebo Samuel is probably out for the rest of the regular season. Juwan Jennings might end up being that wide receiver 2 that ends up going out there. Treylon Burks, he's coming off the concussion last week. Keep an eye on him. He's still around 45-50% owned on some platforms. If he gets cleared this week, he's an absolute ad. Jahan Dotson, he gets the New York Giants this week. 2 weeks ago when they played the New York Giants, 9 targets, 5 receptions, 54 receiving yards, and a touchdown. He is probably going to be a start for me this week, even if the numbers don't even add up. Elijah Moore, Corey Davis left with a head injury in week 14. No other word other than that. Moore had 60 receiving yards. Going to be the wide receiver 2 in this offense if there's no Corey Davis. Going up against a Detroit defense that's bend but don't break. They give up a lot of receiving yards, but they make up for that with some turnovers and then trying to hold you in the red zone. And then Laviska Shenault Jr., a little bit of a late ad here, finding out that DJ Moore left their game early this past week. Injured his ankle. They're going to try to figure out a little bit more about what's going on with that. Laviska Shenault, after Moore went down, he led the team in targets. Only a couple of tight ends to talk about for me right now. My boy Chigioko. Talked about him the last couple of weeks. He's definitely going to be a start for me moving forward. I told everybody in the Start and Sit show last week that if you were looking for somebody to throw in, emergency option, whatever it may be, then Chigioko could be a guy. But I didn't have him listed as a start because I said until he scores, he's not really going to reach the precipice of being able to get you that many points. Ask and you shall receive. Touchdown this past week. Looked really good. Caught all 6 of his receptions for 45 yards and a touchdown. Let's go ahead and add him up. Evan Ingram from Jacksonville. Touchdowns in back-to-back games. 2 this past week. 162 yards. WTF, Evan. Jake and I talked about it on the What Happened this past week show last week, and I was like, Evan Ingram, I've supported my entire career in this industry, and the dude just had one good season, bowed out. I was like, this can't be it. I know he's got the talent. I know he can do it. Bad offenses. I think he's finally going to do something, and Jacksonville gets off to a good, slow start, breaks out, disappears, breaking out again. I don't know, Evan. Evan, suck it. Suck it, Evan. Come on, I need some more reliable performances from you. He's going to be a huge boom or bust asset for you at the tight end position. I would take a shot if you need more boom than bust. At the quarterback position, who are we going to be streaming this week? Well, it would be hard-pressed not to add Brock Purdy to this after a Purdy performance against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, it does look like he has an oblique injury. Didn't sound too bad at this point. I mean, he came out in the fourth quarter, but that was because of the score more than anything. So for Brock Purdy, I mean, hey, if he's healthy this week going up against Seattle, I'm okay with it. I'm okay. Dude looked great. Dude looked awesome. Matt Ryan for Indianapolis. He's going to get Minnesota this week, who just got killed by Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions, and who have had trouble all season long. Matt Ryan, has a really nice upside this week against Minnesota. And then Mac Jones going up against Las Vegas. That allows the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. He can end up being a high upside play for you as well. Defensive special teams this week. The Browns against Baltimore. Baltimore could end up being on their 3rd string quarterback as it is. Baltimore could definitely be in the realm of nice turnovers and some sacks as well. The Saints going up against Atlanta. Desmond Ridder is going to have his first career start. Could be some turnovers in that game from the New Orleans defense. And then the Carolina Panthers going up against Pittsburgh. Mitchie Biscuits had to come in this past week after Kenny Pickett went down with a concussion, and he threw 3 interceptions. I definitely think the Panthers, who just picked off Geno Smith 3 times, could end up making a few picks of their own in that game. Some players to drop, some guys that we might need to be done with. Kyren Williams, I'm definitely going to be done with at this point, which is super odd, considering that Cam Akers was basically ran out of town several weeks ago. Kyren Williams was the guy that they were super excited about. They released Darrell Henderson, and they still didn't do anything with Kyren Williams. James Cook, we tried to warn everybody about this, that he has these games where he gets a decent amount of usage, and I told everyone last week, too, that a lot of his usage came towards the end of the game, that if you picked him up, that he wasn't really start worthy for me. That was a concern. He didn't do anything this past week. Deebo Samuel, now keep an eye on him. You might not drop him right this moment, but it appears as of right now he'll be done for the regular season, which means he's done for your fantasy team. Michael Carter saw a decent amount of targets in the passing game, but like I said, he had a really critical fumble, and Zonovan Knight saw all the touches on the ground. Kareem Hunt, unless you're a Nick Chubb owner, you don't need Kareem Hunt anymore. Gabe Davis, I would hate to do this, but he has really bad matchups against against Cincinnati and New England to end the season. So for Gabe Davis, I don't want to drop him as of yet, and I probably keep him this week. But after that, if you're really having issues with finding somebody for your team and you don't trust Gabe Davis to give you a boom performance, we might have to drop him in those 2 matchups. Tyler Boyd for Cincinnati, he's going to be week to week until we know a little bit more. Don't drop him as of yet, but if he does end up missing the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to be done with him anyway at that point. And then Odell Beckham Jr., if any of you were stashing him out there maybe for a late season run, we can probably close the book on that. Doesn't sound like he's a guy that's really wanting to play too much in the regular season anyway. He's more wanting to join somebody for a playoff run. But ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, the Waiver Wire Show here in week 15. Hit the like button for me, subscribe if you're new here, leave me a comment down below. If a player did not come up that you're interested in picking up or dropping, make your comment short, sweet, and simple. Add player X, drop player Y. I will respond either yes or no, and we'll go from there. Hey, appreciate everybody tuning into the video. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace out, Headliner Nation.